Welcome. This module is intended to raise your awareness of the risks associated with fishing gear snagged or hooked up on the seabed while working on a trawling vessel. On any trawling vessel, fishing gear snagged on the seabed, commonly known as hooking up, is an occupational hazard that has been responsible for a very high proportion of vessel capsizes and, sadly, losses of life. These risks are increased substantially in heavy weather, when strong tides or currents are present, if vessel stability is compromised, and if the skipper and crew fail to respond appropriately. In particular, prawn trawlers are at risk of capsizing if the inside trawl gear hooks up while the vessel is turning, and preparation and awareness are key to avoiding a disastrous outcome. When a trawler is hooked up, the effect is often obvious and may include engine laboring, loss of vessel speed, increased rudder angle, and sudden lurching of the vessel to one side. Immediately this is detected, the person driving the vessel should quickly reduce engine revolutions to slow the vessel or pull the engine out of gear, although sufficient revolutions may be required to maintain vessel steerage. At this time, it is likely the skipper will detect the gear is hooked up if you or anyone else is driving the vessel and immediately take control. If not, the skipper should immediately be alerted. The next response is to consider the sea conditions and decide if the vessel heading should be maintained, if the vessel should be slowly maneuvered with the bow facing the sea, and or if the course needs to slowly be altered to keep snagged gear behind the stern of the vessel. Initial steps to haul the gear should be taken. However, to avoid flooding, all deck hatches and watertight doors should be closed beforehand, particularly in heavy seas, strong tides or currents, and or if the vessel is listing to one side. On a stern trawler, the doors above the stern ramp should be closed to keep seawater from flooding the deck, particularly as the vessel moves astern whilst hauling the gear. Ensure scuppers, drainage holes, and freeing ports are clear and allow seawater to drain from the deck. Efforts should also be taken to ensure the catch cannot slide, contribute to the vessel list, and perhaps introduce a tripping hazard or cause injury as they slide on deck. This includes loose catches of fish and any baskets or tubs of fish on deck. This is also why catches in the hold should always be stowed correctly. If other vessels are nearby, the skipper may alert them by the radio, and or use the appropriate day shapes, or at night or in low visibility, switch on masthead lights to indicate the vessel is restricted in its ability to maneuver. If the skipper determines the hookup presents a risk of vessel capsize, the crew may be instructed to don their PFD or life jacket, ensure that the emergency response bag and first aid kit are readily accessible, and that the life raft or dinghy is free of obstructions. Once these steps have been taken, it is safe to start hauling the gear, although it is also important to stay well clear of the towing wires or winches to avoid injury or worse should the wire part or hauling gear fail. On a stern trawler, with any luck the gear will become free while hauling back. If not, the towing wires are usually hauled until the vessel is above the snagged gear. Hopefully, the movement of the vessel in a sea or swell will unsnag the gear. On a prawn trawler, hauling back can cause the vessel to list dangerously to one side. At no time should the end of the boom be pulled underwater. Crew not engaged in hauling the gear or other activity under the instruction of the skipper should consider standing on the high side of the deck, or even on the foredeck. Depending on sea conditions, hauling back may eventually position the vessel above the snagged gear, and again, vessel movement may help it become unsnagged. Care is required on any trawler to ensure the gear does not tangle with the propeller, rudder, or the hull of the boat. If the gear on a stern trawler still does not come free, then the skipper may decide to steam slowly in the opposite direction in the hope of pulling the gear clear of the snag. If the gear still does not come free, the last remaining option may be to cut the snagged wire with wire cutters, battery-powered grinder, or oxyacetylene equipment. With any luck, it may then be possible to haul the gear using the remaining towing wire. If still unsuccessful, efforts to steam slowly away from the snagged gear may again be made, in the hope of pulling the gear free. If all else fails, this wire may also need to be cut, although attaching a marker buoy to the wire beforehand helps identify the location of the gear should subsequent efforts to retrieve the gear be made. If the gear on a prawn trawler still does not come free, then a next course of action is to haul in the gear that is not snagged, ensuring the trawl net is hauled on board. The snagged towing wire should then be released so it can be drawn alongside and placed over a snatch block or inside a shackle close to the side of the vessel, preferably toward the stern. This reduces the lever action and strain on the booms, and attempts to free the gear, by hauling and or steaming forward slowly, can then be made without dangerous listing of the vessel. Everyone should be standing well clear of the winch and towing wire, in case of failure. If the gear still does not come free, then the final option is to cut the towing wire and consider subsequent retrieval efforts, perhaps using a sturdy grapnel. A few final points. Good housekeeping is important. This means keeping the deck clean and tidy, with all equipment stowed and secured properly to avoid slips, trips, and falls, particularly on a listing vessel. It also prevents this equipment from becoming a dangerous missile or weapon if the vessel suddenly lurches to one side when the gear first hooks up. Next, no two hookups the same, given variation in sea conditions, vessel stability, and crew response. However, as with any emergency, practice is essential. Ideally, the skipper should require all crew to practice what to do in the case of a hookup, or at minimum, explain and demonstrate how they should react in this circumstance. This will improve the timeliness of response to a hookup and reduce the likelihood that you or others panic should the vessel hook up and suddenly lurch to one side. Remember, as crew you also have a responsibility to yourself and others, and that means asking and knowing what is expected of you in any emergency situation. Finally, it is the ability of the skipper and crew to assess the situation and apply their experience, knowledge, and judgment that will increase the odds of a safe and successful outcome. For further information about responding to a hookup, including a brief video, go to www.amsa.gov.au and search for hookup response. Excellent! You have now completed the hookup response module. Let's now review the material that we covered.